Welcome to another episode. Today, I want to kind of cover something very interesting. There's always a lot of debates online about who's the greatest, who's the best player, who's not the best player, teams that you have, and it's always kind of based upon subjective facts. Now, one of the factors that relate to this is really about everybody has their own opinion, and a lot of it is shaped by bias and unconscious bias. Now, in the business world, a lot of times we kind of like to educate ourselves on what is our bias, unconscious bias, so that we know what we are aware of what our potential strengths and weaknesses are and where we can potentially improve and know what we're thinking about with regards to our biases and unconscious bias. So for many of us, it's like you may be hearing this for the first time. So I kind of want to relay this information and kind of educate on this concept so that not only does it allow us to understand sports better and our players and our profiles of players that we tend to like, but also from a perspective where we can probably incorporate this into our daily lives and see how we can also review things in terms of, do we have any biases or unconscious biases that we may have. So first, I just want to kind of get into a basic in terms of a definition of what is a conscious bias versus an unconscious bias. So a conscious bias is something that we are deliberately aware of, is visible, and an unconscious bias is something that we would basically is in our subconscious and it's not aware of it. So, for example, conscious bias is I like pizza, so and it's something that I'm aware of, and it's going to be something that I'm going to always recommend. So, if we go out to eat, when we preferring to go and get pizza, an unconscious bias may be, something where someone has said, for example, this restaurant doesn't have good food, and for whatever reason, I've never tasted the food for whatever reason, but I might now have an unconscious bias against that place because I don't really know why. It just I'm kind of leaning on what someone's opinion is based upon that. So it's not that I'm aware of it; it's kind of subconscious underneath it or unconscious about it that I might have a bias against it because someone had a bad review or a bad experience about a place. So it really is that kind of a differentiation between knowing, like, I know something and something maybe not be that I don't really know because I've been influenced, and it may be an influence that I'm not really fully aware of. Right now, again, to use a food example, if I go to a restaurant and have a bad experience there, I know I'm going to stay away from that place. But if I don't have a bad experience there and someone else tells me about that, I may form an unconscious bias against that place because someone that I know doesn't like that place versus that is something that I know. So with that, I want to kind of look into a kind of an age-old debate and something that's going on right now during the World Cup is the conversation about between Ronaldo and Messi. Now, want to kind of break this down into kind of conscious and unconscious biases. Now, when we look at this argument, a lot of times people will look at it from, if you're a Portugal fan, if you're a Real Madrid fan, Manchester United, Juventus, Sporting Lisbon, or Al Nassr, most likely you're going to have a non-bias to support Ronaldo because he played for your team. The same with Messi for Argentina, Barcelona, Paris Saint-Germain, into Miami. Now, Paris Saint-Germain can be kind of a difference there. And sometimes, actually, when you're a rival fan of these teams, you may have an unconscious bias against those players. So, for example, a Liverpool fan may not like Ronaldo because he played for Manchester United. They may know that because he played for them, or that may shape their views on anything to do with his career. So, for example, whether he's goal scored, his accomplishments, his achievements, there's always going to be that kind of the unconscious bias because he played for Manchester United. The same with Messi. Real Madrid fans may overlook his successes and his quality because he played for a rival, and that is where you can have a potential gray area being a rival fan that you may be clearly, I don't like the player because, they played for opposing team, or anything that they do, I'm always going to have that tint or a hint of bias against them because they played for a team that wasn't my team. So whenever we look at the basis of conscious biases, we always have to factor in, that element of the team that you support. Now, when we go deeper into that, in terms of the unconscious bias, is a lot of times we may hear things such as, Ronaldo is physically more dominant and better goal scorer, whereas Messi is more creative and better playmaker. And these are sometimes a lot of to do with a style preference bias, right? So I may favor creativity And because I have that favor of creativity, I'm going to be biased towards Messi because I prefer the creativity and playmaking, right? Now, if I'm someone who likes goal scoring, physicality, directness, right, I may favor a Ronaldo. But I may not know that because I like those preferences and styles of play, that's why I have a more of an inkling between those two players. And this is putting aside the concept of whether they play for team A or team B, right? This is now based upon what I like that I may be fully aware of or not fully aware of, right? A lot of people may be watching sports and have an understanding like, I like, for example, a counter press style of play. I like a high press style of play, or some people may like tiki taka. Some people may like a more controlled reverse reserve style of play. Those will shape your aspects in terms of how you appreciate players and how you have that kind of conscious and unconscious bias with regards to players. Another aspect again is a narrative bias. A lot of people say, Ronaldo is a workout warrior, and he built his physique into the way it is because of the amount of work he put in, whereas Messi is more naturally gifted. That is not also accurate because we know Messi has worked very hard, works still very hard on his play, and it's not like it's kind of God given talent and he just does nothing to it and just turns up at the game and is phenomenal. There is a lot of hard work going into that, and sometimes with our biases and unconscious bias, we tend to overlook some of the work and effort that these players put in to be at the levels that they are. So when we look at the unconscious bias, the two things that I've mentioned here is very dominant, right? People would say Messi is creative and great playmaking, and that's why he's better than Ronaldo. And it's because again the style of play that they may like, and it may not necessarily be directly related to those players and their individual capabilities. And then for me, which really resonates is you always hear about Ronaldo's hard work, but people won't say the same thing about Messi, even though Messi works just as hard. There's a reason that he's still in shape and playing at the World Cup and still performing at a high level at the age of 38, going to be 39 soon, is because of the hard work. So sometimes we kind of overlook that in favoring biases again. So this is a kind of another level of where we can kind of understand how a bias can sway your opinion on a player. A more again, we kind of see this in basketball as well. You always have the age-old conversation of Jordan versus LeBron, and the conscious level of bias would be, if you're a Bulls fan or you're a and this does sway. I do know that there are fans from the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Heat, and Lakers that may not like LeBron, but a more descriptive or by the book definition would be being a fan of these teams, you would have a bias again for these players. You can throw Kobe into this mix between Lakers fan choosing Kobe over Michael Jordan, because they're both similar profiles. But again, it can come up to a decisive pick between the two as to which player do you prefer. Now, how do we break that down? When we look at the unconscious bias, a lot of times it can be because as a fan, you may be an era fan or bias of 1990s basketball, a more physical, a more tougher a level of basketball versus what will be seen as the current generation of basketball. Now, keeping in mind that LeBron's career started in the early 2000s. So it was kind of that transition between the 90s and 2000s. So it wasn't he was always playing in this 3 point era, but that bias will be there because whenever we look back, we will see that, Jordan played in the 90s. And then, a lot of us will have recency bias in that we would see that Jordan played LeBron played from 2010 to where we are now. But in fact, he was there in the mid 2000s playing in the NBA. So his career kind of has more of an overlap with with Michael Jordan than a lot of us tend to believe, right? So I do believe they've shared a core, at times. So it's not a case of it's a completely different era. There was a small overlap. Now, there is another case of an element of unconscious biases, again, the nostalgia factor, right? Nostalgia is something that we always kind of glorify the past more so than what we believe it to be. So if you look at it right now, a lot of folks will compare players from the 90s and 2000s to be at a very high level. But when you look at their stats compared to players of today, you look at them, well, they wasn't that impressive. But again, different era, different rules, different things that apply. But the nostalgia factor, always we kind of see them as a high level. And even in video games, when you see legend players, they're always kind of like in the 90s, 95, 96s. And then, but at the time when they want the legend player, they would have a lower score in their gaming ranking. So nostalgia always kind of bumps that up. And that's why we kind of have the era bias in this basketball discussion. And then the other aspects in terms of we also have this concept of winning versus versatility bias or longevity bias when it comes to LeBron. So a lot of times people use the argument that Michael Jordan won six championship rings and that's what makes him the best ever. And then others will say, well, LeBron played for 20 years at a high level, got to how many, 10 playoffs, whatever, right? The stats are out there. People always discuss about these, but there are an element of biases in that because someone may be inclined to be supporting about using championships as a measure for what success is, and others may look at stats as a measure for all successes. So, depending upon what your bias is and what you're swayed towards, that will shape the opinion of what would you perceive to be the better player. So it isn't a binary. It isn't a fact. Whenever we talk about the best players, it's always subjective, and your opinions and your biases will really sway in terms of which direction you swing in terms of which player that you would see as will be what you will consider a goat. And when I talk about goat, that's a conversation for another time because that in itself, I have a disagreement with the wording because it means something that for me it's impossible. But we'll discuss another time. Now, back to biases. Now, if you look at this in terms of your day to day life, right? There, you can, once you understand this concept of that, we all have biases that are known and unknown, right? Unknown, as I said, is because someone had told you and it's influenced you, but you're not fully aware of that influence because it's in the background somewhere. When you become aware of these unconscious biases, then you kind of realize why you think in a certain way, why you perform certain decisions and make decisions in a certain way, and it really does help you understand more about yourself. So the reason I kind of put this video together is like today, just kind of from a date point reference, is the World Cup game today. Ronaldo got two goals, and there was a huge conversation on social media about Ronaldo being great, and he scored two goals at the age of 41. Yesterday, Messi did score two goals against Austria. Ronaldo two goals against Uzbekistan, and then there's always going to be comparison. Well, Ronaldo scored against Uzbekistan; they're not really a powerful team. Messi scored against Austria, which is a high-ranking team. You always have these back and forth discussions. But what I kind of wanted to do was kind of peel back the layers and like, where does these conversations come from? Are we ever going to have an agreement? Most likely we're never going to have an agreement. Why are we never going to have an agreement? And that's because we all have our own forms, have our own opinions that are shaped by our biases. We all have them. I have them. You have them. Whether you like to believe it or not, we all have them. And these biases are all shaped based upon our upbringing, our education, our experiences, our life in general. So it's not a bad thing to have biases, all right? Because we all have them. It's a matter of understanding them, knowing that you have them, and then seeing like, is it a known bias that I have, or is it an unknown bias that I have? There's a lot to take on today. I just wanted to kind of get that out there. It's a very deep conversation and a very, if you contemplate it, would could actually be life changing. But that's just one something I want to put out there. So thanks for listening and have a good one.